to Portland City Council. It is May Day 2019. Before we jump into our, well, first I'll let Carla read the roll. She's good at that.
Fish.
Here.
Hardesty.
Here.
Udaley. Fritz.
Here.
Wheeler.
Here, in the spirit of,
Gotta do the city attorney as well.
oh yeah. Hey, Robert, good afternoon. Can you please read us the rules of order and decorum?
Yes, sir.
good to see
Welcome
you.
to the Portland City Council. The City Council represents all Portlanders and meets to do the city's business. The presiding officer preserves order and decorum during City Council meetings so everyone can feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or the first readings of ordinances. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. If it does not, you may be ruled out of order. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When you have 30 seconds left, a yellow light goes on. When your time is done, a red light goes on. Please remain seated in council chambers unless entering or exiting. If you are filming the proceedings, please do not use bright lights or disrupt the meeting. Disruptive conduct such as shouting or interrupting testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being ejected for the remainder of the meeting. After being ejected, a person who fails to leave the meeting is subject to arrest for trespass. Thank you for helping your fellow Portlanders feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe.
Very good, thank you. And we apparently have a world championship hammering competition going on next door, so I apologize for that.
Either that or an invasion of woodpeckers.
Could be either. So before we jump into our first time certain item this afternoon, I'd like to clarify a procedural error that occurred this morning with item 376. Carla, can you please read item 376?
Grant a 10-year franchise to New Singular Wireless PCS LLC for wireless communications services in the city.
So we never want to deprive people of their opportunity to comment, and this morning I accurately read my talking points. However, I mistakenly closed the item at the end of the hearing. So colleagues, I'd like to clarify for the record that written testimony will remain open for 21 days until 2 p.m. on Wednesday, May 22nd. Again, that's 2 p.m. on Wednesday, May 22nd. Emails are great, and the ideal place to submit them is to cctestimony@portlandoregon.gov. cctestimony@portlandoregon.gov. I'm sorry if there was any confusion. And with that, Carla, can you please read our first time certain item?
Item 389, accept the Portland Design Commission
Thank you.
2018 State of the City Design Report.
Very good, 389. It's my pleasure to introduce the 2018 Portland Design Commission State of the City Design Report. The first item of business is to thank the dedicated volunteers who serve on the commission. This commission has met 3, sometimes 4 times a month in 2018, and often for many hours as they review land use cases and provide design advice. They are a dedicated, hardworking group of individuals that include Julie Livingston, who is our chair, Sam Rodriguez, who's the vice chair, Don Vallister, Andrew Clark, Jessica Molinar, Zari Santner, and Brian McCarter. For those of you who are here, could you please stand up so that we can acknowledge your great work? Thank you. Thanks for your service, and I'm sorry that applause was in lieu of pay, so there you have it. I'd also like to thank Tim Heron for his work at BDS, the Bureau of Development Services, staffing the Design Commission, and Cara Fioravanti for her work supervising BDS staff who does the design reviews. Thanks to all of you as well. Now, this commission will be presenting their 7th report before the council, but they've been operating in the city of Portland since all the way back around 1980, providing leadership and expertise on urban design and architecture and on maintaining and enhancing Portland's historical and architectural heritage. This report comes to council in an important time for the city, and it's expanding design overlay districts as development and construction is unprecedented in the history of design review. These neighborhoods in the design overlay zone deserve the appropriate protection and predictability of quality infill that meets our density goals and inevitable growth. I look forward to hearing more today from the commission members and interested public, and I'm committed to supporting the commission in all of its efforts. Design Commission Chair Julie Livingston is already up here to share with the council the Portland Design Commission's 2018 State of the City Design Report. Good afternoon, and thanks for being here.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting us. We are very pleased to be here. It hasn't been long since we were last here. We made our 2017 State of the City address to council in October of 2018. It was a little bit delayed. So today's report is really just a wrap-up on 2018. I should be fairly short, maybe 20 minutes, and then we have some fantastic testimony to share with you. There are people here today who participate in kind of all areas of the design review process that would like to share their thinking with you. So moving to the slide presentation. Today's agenda, we will cover the purpose of design review, take a look at DOZA, Design Overlay Zoning Assessment Administrative Improvements.
Why do you call that DOZA?
Exactly. Not only do we call it, there are two types of DOZA. So this is the implementation of DOZA rather than the planning phase of DOZA. It's tough on staff. We'll take a look at caseload data from 2018, some of the highlights of the work that we did, and then an overview of projects, which is really the show and tell of what we saw in the hearings room in 2018. And then we will make the Design Excellence Award. This is the third Design Excellence Award that the Design Commission will have made. It's a fairly new award, and we don't reveal it until today. So the only person, there are two people in the room that know who will receive this award, me and the person here to receive it. And then we will have some testimony. So modest presentation, I plan to keep it to about 20 minutes. The hard copy that you have has a little bit more detail. And I know that not all commissioners were here in October, so Commissioner Hardesty, if I use any acronyms or you would like some additional explanation on anything, please just stop me and let me know.
Have we met? Thank you for that.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, the purpose of design review. The design overlay zone is intended to promote design excellence. The City of Portland has been engaged in design review for almost 40 years, and this is the reason our neighborhoods have character, our streets are walkable, and our central city is filled with buildings that stand the tests of time. This is a fairly new purpose statement. In April 2017, Mark Hinshaw of Walker Macy, the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability's Design Overlay Zoning Assessment Consultant, recommended Design Commission adopt a charter and clarify its scope. As part of that work, we reworked the design review purpose statement and made some tweaks to better align it with the goals of the 2035 plan. This refreshed language also addresses one of Mark Hinshaw's priority recommendations, to use the three tenets of design, context, public realm, and quality, as an organizational structure to simplify, consolidate, and revise the community design standards and design guidelines. The hard copy that you have should have a one-pager that goes into the business of what the Design Commission does in greater detail. So the DOZA administrative improvements. Updating the standards and guidelines, the tools that we use, is underway with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. The process improvements recommended by DOZA are the responsibility of the Bureau of Development Services. These administrative improvements have been accomplished over the last 2 years and have had a very positive impact on the work that rolls out in the hearings room. We've been very focused on the three aspects of the process that applicants told us were the most important to them: efficient hearings, timeliness, and predictability. Early design advice requests are proving to be critical to streamlining the process. Early design advice gives applicants the opportunity to test pro forma ideas before financial commitments are made, and allows them to integrate feedback from the Commission very early into their design work. The hard copy that you have includes a DOZA Administrative Improvements Report that goes into much greater detail than what is included here on this slide. So, caseload data. Briefings, retreats, work sessions in 2017, and everything else that flowed out in 2017, and then also in 2018. 2015, 2016, and 2017 were all record years for work that the commission did. 2017 was particularly busy due to the large number of housing proposals that were vested just prior to the adoption of inclusionary housing. So this summarizes everything that happened, or all of the significant events that happened over the course of the year. Interesting to note here, the Type 3 cases, which are the Design Commission review cases, decreased by about a third between 2017 and 2018, and the Type 2s, which are reviews by staff, only decreased by about 12%. So for all intents and purposes, Design Commission's responsibility is Central City, and staff review most of what happens outside of Central City, so Central City slowed more than other neighborhoods.
Julie, I think I remember most of those appeals to council, but can you, to what do you attribute the fact that there were 3 appeals of type 3 decisions to council in 2017, one on a building that you and I continue to disagree over, and none in 2018? To what do you attribute that?
There haven't been very many contentious projects in 2018. It's been a fairly smooth hearings process on our Type 3s. And I think that 2 of the appeals that rolled through the council chamber in 2017 were actually neighborhoods appealing approvals.
I see.
So, any party can appeal. And Design Commission may approve a case that would then be appealed by the neighborhood association if the neighborhood association is in disagreement.
Gotcha.
In fact, I think just one of those 3 came with some conditions of approval that the applicant did not like, and that's why that case landed here in the council chamber.
Okay.
So slightly different environment, but for the most part, just cases that did not disrupt neighborhoods from the neighborhood's perspective. So the last line item here, Thursdays, these are the days that we host briefings and design advice requests and also hearings. And so we like to track how many Thursdays we work. We still meet, even though things have slowed, about 2 out of every 3 Thursdays. This slide is one that I like very well because it's a graphic presentation of the number and location of the buildings, not the cases, that have been approved through the Type 3 process in both 2017 and 2018. So 2017 is captured in blue and 2018 is captured in green. If every one of these buildings were currently under construction, there would be 69 cranes in the sky, but that's not the case. And if you read last week's DJC, you know that many of the housing developments that we have approved that were vested pre-inclusionary housing have yet to pull their permits. So things are a little bit slower than this slide might indicate. Nonetheless, all of the Central City neighborhoods are gaining a number of new large buildings that will impact and change neighborhood character, and the Design Commission has to be able to understand and interpret many different contexts and consider both present and future circumstances. So we all spend a lot of time thinking about housing, Design Commission as well as everyone else. And when we were here in 2018, we presented several slides that gave you a little bit of a background around what we've seen in the hearings room, and we have updated these slides to capture all of 2018 data. So this slide represents Type 3.
Excuse me for a sec, please.
You bet.
What is the difference between the green and the blue on this slide?
Thank you very much for asking. The blue represents housing cases. The green represents all other cases, so not housing. Those 2 combined are all of the cases that have rolled through the hearings room in 2018.
So if I may ask, so you're not just responsible for reviewing housing, but other types of developments?
Yes, this is the case. The Design Commission reviews for all intents and purposes, all large development projects in the central city and the program of the building has no impact on whether or not we see it. If it is being built in the central city, we see it.
But not in, say, East Portland?
There is D overlay in other neighborhoods. So the design overlay, the D overlay, applies to the central city. There is D overlay along many centers and corridors, and also in Gateway. And so we often see projects in Gateway as a type 3, but many of the other neighborhoods go through a type 2 process, which is a staff process. So not every proposal in the city of Portland, not by a long shot, I think we're less than, I want to say 3%, less than 5% of the land area would be subject to design review, and then not all of those cases come in front of commission.
Thank you.
You bet. So these are all of the cases that we have seen between 2010 and 2017. The green represents non-housing, the blue represents housing. And some of these cases are more than one building. So there's not a direct correlation between the number of buildings and the number of cases that you see here. In 2018...
Could you explain that when you say more, so that's like a multi-building development? Is
Yeah.
that what you mean? So it might be housing plus
It could be a
commercial or
super
something?
block in the Lloyd District that has
okay.
4 or more buildings
I see.
in a single proposal.
Okay, got it. Thank
Yeah.
you, that's helpful.
In 2018, we saw 13 housing proposals, and 8 of those were subject to inclusionary housing. So we are moving that direction with the housing that's coming online. In 2017, it was a banner year. We saw 19 housing proposals, but as you know, not all of those have pulled permits and are under construction. So this
Can
is a
you go
look.
back to that slide? I'm sorry
I
to
think I
catch-
can. Yes,
There
I can.
You're better than I am. So that's actually interesting. So as I look at that slide, the movement from 2017 to 2018 looks to be predominantly in non-housing projects. Am I wrong?
We lost more. There were fewer non-housing proposals in 2018, significantly fewer in 2018 than there were in 2017.
What
and
are those predominantly?
Housing more or less held steady.
Yeah, so what are those non-housing projects that basically were cut in half between 2017 and 2018? And why do you think that is? Because it's not inclusionary housing.
No, inclusionary housing is not driving that. It could be any other building type. It could be campus buildings, medical buildings, any other program, office buildings, any other program that happens in our central city would be in that green bar.
So that's interesting.
Well, Mayor,
Okay.
one of the reasons
Yeah.
it's interesting is that how many times did people come before us in 2018 and say that as a result of inclusionary housing and the plan that we put into place, it is likely developers would scrap housing development and shift to something else. What this tells us is that housing remains steady and those all other categories shrunk. And there might be a myriad of reasons for that, including financing and just glut, of commercial office space or other kinds of things. But the fact that housing held firm in following inclusionary housing rules, I think is encouraging.
Would you say that that's firm? I mean, I would see it as a reduction.
Well, here's my point. I'm talking in relative terms. If you look in 2017, first of all, we're entering we went 3 years of historic boom. We're now tapering down, and there's a prediction that we're going to have a cooling off period. And there, as Julie has noted earlier, there are some properties that were entitled to move forward with housing that have been shelved. We know in South Waterfront, a developer has decided not to move forward. So for whatever reason, so we're going to see a cooling off. But if the prediction was true that inclusionary housing was going to have such a fundamental impact on the marketplace that it was going to change the fundamentals around housing, I wouldn't have expected to see such a robust blue streak in 2018, or half the projects. I would have expected to see more of the all other if people were
Right.
converting their buildings to non-housing
You-
uses.
2018, you would not expect to see much blue bar there at all in 2018. And we had 13 housing cases in the central city in 2018, and 8 of them, well over half, were subject to inclusionary housing
Yeah.
and had a plan to accomplish it.
Commissioner Hursti? Okay.
So this slide looks at all of the Type 2 staff reviews and all of the Type 3 Design Commission reviews on a quarterly basis, going back to the end of 2016, which is about the time we started to see a significant uptick in proposals that were trying to beat inclusionary housing. Again, not all of these are out of the ground. There is still a significant backlog of work from pre-IH, but you can see that the Type 3s, which are in green here, are still moving forward. There is less housing in the Type 2D overlay right now in the fourth quarter of 2018 than there is in the central city. Housing units that are vested pre-inclusionary housing. This slide shows how many there are that are not out of the ground yet. The Type 2 reviews are on the left, the Type 3 reviews are on the right. The green bar hasn't yet begun construction, and the blue bar has. So of those that have not yet begun construction, some are permitted, some are in permit review. Given nervousness around current market conditions, some are up for sale, but there are an immense number of housing units sitting in the queue waiting to be constructed. In the Type 2 zone, there are 669 not yet started, 529 over construction. That's about 44%. Type 3s, there are almost 4,500 housing units not started and 800 under construction, so about 15% of the total is under construction. The post-inclusionary housing pipeline. This is the last slide before we move to the overview of projects. This is a look at the housing proposals that have entered the design review process since February of 2017, when inclusionary housing went into effect. The projects that aren't vested and have an obligation to provide affordable housing units are all represented here. The Type 2 bar, which is on the left, is a standalone column, but the other 3 are cumulative. So you can look at the pre-app conference column, the design advice request column, and the Type 3 column and add those together. If you do, that shows that there are a total of 9,400 housing units in the queue. When we were here in October, these 3 columns were just a little over 3,000. So there is a significant uptick in the number of housing units that are in the pipeline right now that will go through a Type 3 design review, or that we expect to go through a Type 3 design review. A lot of these are likely developers who are trying on ideas through the design advice request, trying to figure out what pencils, what doesn't.
Julie, are you seeing any patterns in terms of developers experimenting with cost-effective construction techniques like modular housing or other kinds of innovations?
There is much attention there. Thank you for asking about modular housing. In fact, the Portland Housing Bureau has completed a feasibility study on the Powell project, and the Powell project will be in for a design advice request later this month. One of the things that we investigated on that project was whether or not modular housing was affordable today, more affordable today than it has been in the past. And what we found is that there's still about a 7 to 8% uptick, depending on any number of variables, but it is still more expensive. So it has not yet reached a place where we will see a lot of it. Over the course of the past couple of years, there's been one proposal that's come in for a Type 3 review that has been a proposed modular building. It was designed by Works Progress, and it was in the Lloyd District. It has not started construction yet.
Are you saying that it's still more expensive without regard to economies of scale?
Yeah, here's what we found on the Powell project. I worked on this. That site has a limited building envelope, a certain height, a certain bulk of building, a certain amount of floor area ratio is permitted on that site. modular construction doubles up on walls and doubles up on floors and ceilings. And so you lose a lot of volume to the building structure, and that generally means fewer housing units. So if your pro forma pencils with fewer housing units, that's brilliant. But if it doesn't, and if you're trying to maximize the number of housing units on the site, it's probably not going to be feasible.
That's interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Commissioner Hardesty, sorry.
Thank you. Out of the 9,400 housing units that are permitted but not under construction, what's your sense for how many of those will move forward?
Thank you for asking that. The 9,400 are in the pipeline. They don't necessarily have permits, and they're not necessarily in for permit review, but they are in for early advice for all intents and purposes. And then some are actually in the Type 3 review process, which is part of the entitlements. I think looking at this slide, it's fair to say that anything in the two middle columns, pre-app conference or design advice request, could maybe not go forward. A lot of that might be developers trying on ideas,
Thank you.
or at
That's-
least some percentage of it is that.
That's helpful. And these are not housing that would be considered affordable housing. These are market rate only.
At this point, everything in this slide would be subject to inclusionary housing. And it would include whatever affordable housing developments, fully affordable housing developments are in the pipeline right now. So the Powell project is included in here. And any other project like that that PHB has underway. You bet. Okay, this is the show and tell. This is the real reason the City of Portland values the design review process. We are going to share images of 11 recent projects that we think really have raised the bar on design excellence. There have been more, but these 11 have addressed all three tenets of design very well. This first one is the Moxie Hotel by the DLR Group. This hotel is currently under construction across Southeast Alder from the Sentinel Hotel. It's one of many very small developments that are on a quarter block or less that Design Commission has seen recently. There's a significant uptick in buildings with very small footprints. This building does a particularly good job with public realm guidelines and goes so far as to integrate the possibility of food carts in an otherwise underutilized loading dock. This is the 4th and Montgomery building on the PSU campus by SRG Partnership. This building does a really nice job with context and public realm tenants. And Dan Zalko from PSU is here to testify today. He may give you a little bit more information about this building. This building merited a lot of discussion in the hearings room. It's on the campus, but it's an office building that will be occupied by PSU, PCC, OHSU, and the City of Portland. And I'm looking to Dan to be sure I got that list correct? I got it. Okay, thank you very much. And so, how do you drop an office building into the middle of an urban campus? SRG first responded to the site conditions. The site is adjacent to the streetcar and also PSU's Urban Plaza, and then it shares this block with an historic apartment building. And then they followed up with a facade that curves at the proud corner and is skinned in a manner that connotes movement. So it's a very active facade. Really nice job with C4, complement the context of existing buildings, and C7, design corners that build active intersections.
Julie, we have two photographs, one on the right, one on the left. What's the evolution?
Believe it or not, you are looking at the finished project. Those are two different views of the same structure.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a remarkable building. I mean, it really has a different character depending on where you're standing.
Nice.
Okay, there are a couple of tall, shiny buildings in this slide, and the one that is more or less in the center is Block 216. This has gotten a lot of talk recently. This is the full block development that will sit between the Pittock Building and the Galleria. As proposed, this full block development is 460 feet tall. That's about 35 stories. And it has a mixed-use program of ground floor commercial activity, office space, 250 hotel rooms, and also housing. The development team really went the distance on public realm guidelines. They've got a very nicely programmed ground floor. And they also made a very strong proposal for the first block of Green Loop development, which you can...
When you say the ground floor, could you elaborate on that just a little bit more?
Yeah, so this is a very complex building program. There aren't that many buildings around town that have, ground floor retail, a hotel, office space, and then also residential units. That's a lot to pack into a building. One of the reasons that it's 460 feet tall. And so there's a lot of need at the ground floor. There are several lobbies, there are loading docks, access to underground parking, all kinds of stuff happening at the ground level that could consume the street wall and our public realm. But GBD, the design team, did a really good job of limiting not only loading dock and auto access, but then in emphasizing the really good things about what happens on the ground floor. So super retail space, really nice lobbies, and really did a good job making sure that this building at its lower levels fit really, really well into the city structure. And also, they addressed the green loop here. And so if you look to the left of the proposed building, you can see a bunch of trees in the public right-of-way, and that is the first block of the green loop that will be redeveloped. So really nice job with B5, make plazas, parks, and open spaces successful, and also C9, develop flexible level sidewalk spaces. Central East Side, a little building on the Central East Side. This is an apartment building with ground floor commercial space that will go up at Northeast Grand and Davis. This was approved fairly recently. This is just north of the Burnside Bridgehead, so there is still more to be built at the Burnside Bridgehead. Ankrum Moyson Architects brought this in. They have, you'll see several of their buildings in today's examples because they've had several housing buildings in 2018. Like many buildings the commission sees, the site, program, and construction methods created many design challenges, but the building makes a very fair response to all three tenets. And one of the really nice things about this building, I think, is the way the design team really worked on this pinwheel motif, and inside the ends of the pinwheels, there are great balconies that are attached to the housing units. So this building makes great corners. The Salmon Street building by Sarah Architects. Kurt Schultz from Sarah is also here to testify today. This is one of several projects Kurt presented to Design Commission in 2018. This is a site in Goose Hollow. It is immediately north of Lincoln High School. And it's an unusual block because it's not the standard 200 by 200 Portland City block. In fact, the corner that we are looking at in this image is a gently flat iron point, and the design team exploited this feature well to make an elegant residential building that fits well into the Goose Hollow context. So this building does a really nice job of A3, respect the Portland block structure, and A7, establish and maintain a sense of urban enclosure. Also C4, complement the context of existing buildings. Kurt did a really nice job with materials on this building that fit really well into Goose Hollow.
So I'm just going to comment because I can't help myself. It's like my own form of Tourette's, I guess. But right next door to this is the Mac stop that's proposed to be closed, is it not?
Yes,
Just thought I'd say that.
yeah.
Okay.
And
Out
is it-
loud.
Is the place where it's being built, is that where currently there's accessory parking for the Multnomah Athletic
is.
Club? Do we know what they're planning to do?
I don't know. Whatever their plans are for parking expansion have not rolled through the hearings room.
Interesting, thank
Right
you.
across the street.
Coming soon to a council near us.
Kurt will testify in a few minutes. He may have a better idea.
Stadium right there.
So also in Goose Hollow, and also by Ankrum Moyson, the Art Tower. Paul Jeffries and his team at Ankrum just really knocked this out of the park. This is a new residential tower that will be built on the Artists Rep site. It's a complicated program because of the underground connections to the existing Scottish Rite Temple. This building responds very well to the three tenets, but its response to guidelines about quality are particularly strong. A4, use unifying elements. C5, design for coherency. C11, integrate roofs and use rooftops. And C2, promote permanence and quality in design. Also a special call out for guideline B6, develop weather protection. So important in Portland. This team really carried the design party all the way through, and the canopies at the ground floor are a very clear reflection of the larger design party. Really nicely done.
And where is this?
This is in Goose Hollow. It's on the site of the current Artists Rep.
Thank
Block 40 by Hensley Lampkin Rachel Architects. This is in South Waterfront, and Block 40 is an unusually large site adjacent to Macadam. There are two buildings visible in this image, the red brick structure in front and then just behind a white structure. The developer, Alamo Manhattan, and the architect are both home-based in Texas. And Matt Segrist, the founder of Alamo Manhattan, wasn't able to join us today, but he provided some written testimony. I hope that you've received the written testimony from Matt. This team is currently engaged in design advice requests for 4 more buildings in South Waterfront. We see them in the hearings room frequently because they are infrequently for design advice request. These buildings changed greatly as they moved through the design process, and this team was very responsive to comments received from the commission. This is a site with many challenges, a major grade change, fast-moving traffic along Macadam, the adjacent streetcar, the obligation to develop a block of Southwest Lane as a public access way, and the first of the 2 buildings is now under construction. In the River District, another building by Ankrum. This is 815 West Burnside. This is the first project that came through that was subject to inclusionary housing. And if you've been to the North Park blocks recently, you may have seen that the Firestone building, right next door to the Art House, is vacant and fenced. That's the site of this building. This is a neat building. It's a really nice foil to the terse facade of the AT&T building directly across the street. And we felt that this did a really nice job with A5 enhance, embellish, and identify areas, and also C8 differentiate the sidewalk level of buildings, so both context and public realm.
Julie, this is one of the first really distinctive buildings that we've seen, other than a hotel, that overlooks the North Park blocks. In most other cities, that land adjacent to a park in the middle of the city would be prime land. A little bit like NATO, thinking about development along NATO with the Riverview. Why do you think it's taken so long to jumpstart development along the North Park blocks?
Yeah, I think that would take a scrub through the code to see what the development potential of sites have been in this area. There are many structures that are contributing structures, that have some historic nature to them along the park blocks as well.
There's also a couple of parking lots.
Yeah, that's true.
At the far north end. It's just curious that we in other cities, we think about apartment buildings overlooking public spaces as being, prime land.
Well, and the quarter block is becoming more common, and I think a lot of the pattern of development in Old Town, Chinatown, especially, is smaller development. And now that quarter blocks pencil, we may be seeing more. This is a full half block, so it's very sizable. But Burnside in the past has really not been very desirable because it's a really busy street. And then, of course, there's the AT&T building, which doesn't hold up its side of the bargain on making a street. So it's just not a good neighbor. But this building is going to do a lot to really repair this block of Burnside and I think spur development of adjacent parcels, many of which are just a quarter block.
I'm wondering whether the comprehensive plan updates in 2016 enabled this to have the height and FAR that it needed.
I don't know. I don't know about that. I would have to investigate that to be able to say yes or no. I know that this developer really struggled with the pro forma and keeping the building height low enough and putting enough units in to make the thing pencil. Actually making this happen was difficult, and changing the construction type just wasn't feasible. So this was like as much as could be done here right now.
By the way, just as a few minutes ago, Commissioner Fritz was lamenting the loss of the tailgating space for Thorns games across the street from, or at least it's where PSU does its tailgating, and that's a sad comment because it's like tiny. This is the space where we normally stage one of the Rose Festival parades.
Yes.
So the one that's at night is where the
Starlight.
The Starlight is where we stage a lot of the cars, so this will create some logistical challenges.
Yes, it will.
I'm guessing there were a lot of downtown property owners who were just watching the comprehensive plan process to see how much they were going to get. There were very few places where we decreased the development capacity,
Yeah.
so I'm guessing you'll see a lot more.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, Julie, we won't hold you accountable for going over 20 minutes because we have a lot of questions. So
Thank you very much.
you're very welcome.
This is the redevelopment of the Pepsi bottling plant. This is pretty exciting stuff. This, for a number of reasons, this is exciting. This was the first planned development under the new code that's been in front of Commission, and Dorothy Ferris of Methuen is here to testify today and will likely speak a little bit more to that master plan process. The first Type 3 review associated with Pepsi blocks, the first buildings that will come in for Type 3, is on our agenda later this month, I believe. The planned development is a master planning mechanism that allows for greater flexibility on large sites if the development includes features that provide public benefit. So the goals of a successful master plan are high-quality design that's integrated into the broader urban fabric, pedestrian-oriented design with a strong orientation towards multimodal transportation alternatives, access to light and air, protection of public view corridors, a vibrant public realm, open space areas for gathering and also passive and active recreation, affordable housing, and energy-efficient development. This is just really a nice proposal, and as you can see, the Pepsi Pavilion remains.
What are they going to do with that? What's the
My
proposal?
understanding is it's going to be renovated and updated and made available as a retail opportunity. Maybe Dorothy
Awesome.
knows a little bit more about it than I do.
That is very exciting
Be a
to
cool
hear.
restaurant.
Yeah, there's an immense amount of potential here. There's a really nice plaza on Sandy, immediately adjacent to that space that could be fantastic. In the foreground, there is a small, oddly shaped block with a one-story building on it. That's the Zipper. So this entire proposal does a really nice job of creating views and in kind of accommodating what's existing in this neighborhood already that is interesting development, and then kind of pushing it further. Very well received, really nicely done. So there are also Type 2 reviews that are completed by staff, and sometimes the developers, the applicants choose to come in for a design advice request with Design Commission. That's what happened here. This is the Adidas Village expansion, and Lever Architecture is the designer. The development team elected to participate in a design advice request with Commission. It was not required. The design advice request is available to all Type 2 and Type 3 applicants, and there are any number of reasons that a Type 2 applicant might come in for a design advice request, including the fact that it creates a really good structure for public involvement. So there were many neighbors in the hearings room on the day that the design advice request happened for this project. And Chris Traball, the chair of the Overlook Neighborhood Association, is here to testify today.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay, so that's it. That's all I have. And I would be happy to answer other questions.
Kirsty?
Thank you. I have
Yes.
one more question. How many new hotel rooms have we built in the last couple of years?
Oh my gosh, so many. And I don't know what that exact number is, but we can certainly do the research and let you know.
I would appreciate it because
Yeah.
this seems to be a new hotel going up every week,
I think there is.
right?
Yeah.
And it's scary to
Yeah.
think that we're going to have all those empty rooms
Yeah,
in
well,
the city.
we can do a quick summary over the past, just the last building cycle and figure out exactly how many hotel rooms we expect there to be.
I have those numbers from the Visitor Development Fund, from Travel Portland, because they're not done yet. There's a whole bunch more coming along,
Yeah,
so I can get
it's
those
true.
to both of you.
There are many hotels that we could have put in this presentation that we didn't.
You know, just on the hotel issue, there's two opportunities here, obviously. One is, if there is a softening of the market, it's going to mean a better deal for tourism, and we're going to see more people coming here because it's more affordable. But at the same time, if there is overbuilding and a number of these projects don't succeed and they fail, I hope the Housing Bureau is poised to take over one or two of them because they are ready-made for the kind of affordable housing we need.
They are
sort of in that
self-contained housing
mid-level.
units. Yeah. Yeah, that is an interesting idea. They are more than an SRO, maybe slightly less than a studio, and in many cases, probably equivalent to a studio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if they go into foreclosure.
And Julie, I'm assuming that you, in the past, reviewed the Convention Center Hotel.
Yes.
Seems to be coming along nicely.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And you will hear just a little bit more about that in a few minutes.
Okay, just to follow up with Commissioner Hardesty and Commissioner Fisher's comments, we recently attracted a 13,000-member convention to the convention center for after the hotel is built, so it's already starting to do its job.
There's a lot going on in that neighborhood. So this is the 2018 Design Award winner. You saw this building in October. It's the Elks Children's Eye Clinic on OHSU's Markham Hill campus. The architect is NBBJ in Seattle, and the landscape architect is the Portland firm of Mayer Reed. This proposal arrived in the hearings room fully resolved and beautifully expressed. The building and landscape work together to create a place of healing. They are elegant in their simplicity. The site plan organizes and makes sense of competing uses in a manner that improves the pedestrian environment and also benefits both the new building and the existing Casey Eye Institute. The one big architectural move, a sky bridge skinned with dichroic glass that connects to the neighboring structures, is absolutely contrary to every idea about how to create a strong public realm that exists in guidelines. But in this context, on the Hill, it works very, very well. OHSU is to be commended for taking their role as an urban medical campus seriously and consistently delivering projects both on the Hill and at the Schnitzer campus that accomplish the 3 tenets of design. And here today to provide testimony and also receive the award. We don't have a physical award.
So
At some point, we're going to have to create a physical award because right now it's just like words in the air.
Really, the award goes to, is it the building and the Mayer Reed garden?
The award is to this building for an outstanding job of addressing the design guidelines. And Carol Mayer Reed is here today to accept the award on behalf of the team.
But part of the design is obviously this public space they created for people that
Beautiful
are there.
landscape. Yes, a healing garden.
And just a shout out to the Elks. My son was born with strabismus and had a couple of surgeries as a baby. And we went up to the Casey Eye Clinic, which is one of the best in the world. But we were always struck by the fact that all of the volunteer positions we saw were Elks. And many of them were, in official garb, but they were Elks. And the Elks, as Casey, of course, is the UPS family. And the Elks have just made this part of their philanthropy. And I think it's just incredible that now they're actually adding a building to the campus.
So will this sky bridge allow for people to be inside from KCI over to the main hospital?
My understanding is that it connects Casey Eye Institute to the parking structure and to the new building.
That might help us with our design for the however to get people up there from Bob Boulevard. So that's helpful. Thank you.
Perhaps.
And then what's the process for choosing the award?
The Design Commission Chair surveys staff and other commissioners. This is the third award. The first was Framework, the tall wood building. The second, last year, what did we do last year?
Wasn't it that Clofel building? Was it the Allied Works building on 23rd?
No,
That was the
that was
Landmarks. Commission.
Landmarks.
It'll come back to you.
It was unanimous. Whatever it was, we agreed unanimously
No, it was
last year.
it was unforgettable.
That's all right. They also forgot the award that we gave them,
right.
apparently.
It was, the first year was Lever Architecture. The second year was, gone.
We're not leaving until somebody remembers.
Yeah. I'm going to have to follow up with an email. That's really embarrassing.
Carol, you got it?
I'm sure somebody's got a phone.
That's right. It was District Office by Hacker. Former Design Commissioner David
you're in
Keltner.
trouble.
Where is that building again? Where is that building again?
Central East Side.
Right.
It's under construction right now. It's the CLT building
On-
that's going
on
up in Central
Grand
East
or-
Side on Grand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Great. That's
It
great.
is, yeah, it's lovely. So this is our award winner this year, and if you don't have further questions for me, I will invite Carol Mayer Reed forward to testify. She will then be followed by Kurt Schultz of Sarah Architects, Chris Trable of the Overlook Neighborhood Association, Dan Zalko from PSU, and Dorothy Ferris from Methuen, in that order.
Great. Come on
You're
up.
welcome to come forward.
Thanks for the great slide presentation as well. It's great to be able to visualize it.
Glad to.
Good afternoon. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Appreciate being here. And thank you, Julie, and thank you on behalf of OHSU and the NBBJ team. And we were absolutely blown away because we know how many projects you see, and we can barely get our project through your process because of the heavy schedule that you have to follow, and it's a busy, busy time. So we appreciate the recognition and the work that went into it. So thank you. And just to correct one little thing, this Elks Children's Clinic does not connect to the new hospital, but there is a plan for getting that Markham Hill connector, and we're going to be having a work session with you shortly in the next month or so to give you more information about that. So,
And not to interrupt, but I believe Commissioner Zeri Zantner has participated on the Green Ribbon Committee that's studying
Yes.
that connector. So you will
Yes.
likely see Zeri then as well.
yes, yes. So, shall I start, I guess? Okay. Let's see, I just really am pleased to speak today on behalf of my experience with the Portland Design Commission and in support of the value that the design advice request process brings. I'm a landscape architect and an urban designer. I've worked in Portland for the last 35-plus years, and I've had experience in using the design review, type 3 land use review process for a wide variety of projects, and I took this opportunity to go back and find out how many, and it's been 28 projects, so that's kind of blew me away. These projects range from public spaces and civic and institutional buildings to private development such as mixed-use projects, housing, hotels, and office buildings. Some of these include Director Park for Portland Parks and Recreation, the Convention Center Plaza for Metro that's currently under construction, the new Hyatt Regency Convention Center Hotel, the new Lincoln High School for Portland Public Schools, the Collaborative Life Sciences Building and the Night Cancer Research Building on the Schnitzer campus for OHSU, the Carl Miller Center and Newberger Hall renovation, both on the PSU campus. And coming up in the pipeline is the hospital expansion for OHSU on Markham Hill and an OMSI district master plan. So it's a lot going on, and I appreciate being able to come in here and testify today. In some of these projects, we lead a team, but for most of the projects, we actually have a key role on the architect-led teams as the site designers. We find ourselves in a really good position early on to strategize and advise the consulting teams, and especially on teams that are coming from out of town. On the planning and design of our city, perhaps we have a different way of seeing our city. It's not just about the building as an object, but it's has a lot of strong emphasis on the public realm and the considerations of context. Every building next to it and the open spaces that are adjacent. We are encouraged to look beyond the borders to understand, if not anticipate, what the next adjacent building or development might be and how our project might be catalytic or serve a framework for future design response. And we also look to support the pedestrian connections in the high-quality urban spaces so that our city remains welcoming and inviting. And our design teams and our clients, both public and private, feel that the design advice request process provides extraordinary value. Most of these projects are really complex, just the few that Julie just showed. There's layers and layers of design thinking that go into how you shape a building, how you address the public realm, and provide connectivity to everything around it. In fact, we feel it's essential to have early conversations with staff and the commission about site analysis, about issues, concerns, and we have many, many questions in the beginning of a process. We understand that the best projects come with a rigor and adherence to the guidelines set by the city. I think this process makes us work harder and makes more thoughtful decision-making and more interdisciplinary process. And there's also many ways to interpret the guidelines. As you know, they're aspirational and lofty, and they're not meant to address any particular project, but the city in general. So applying them to a project is a really interesting puzzle to solve. This is where getting the early advice from the commission to inform the design team is most useful. We feel we're more free to test ideas. We illustrate and discuss multiple project concepts. just in the early clay shaping formulation of the project, we ask for guidance. Sometimes we bring models, do you like this, or what do you think about that? So sometimes the program elements are still being refined, and we still have room in this process to make adjustment before going too far down the road with our clients' dollars and the design team fees that we're locked into a direction that ultimately may not be successful when it comes down to the hearing. Some of the examples, if you don't mind, is just how the project is perceived, how it fits into its context, how it fits on its slope. I mean, we have a sloping downtown and not a flat city. So how do we address corners? How do we address the mid-block? How do we address the street in general? How do we connect to transit? Then there's this idea of microclimate. There's shade, there's wind, there's solar gain, there's existing trees. There's just a lot of things to consider. The service areas, the bike parking, entries for parking and people, doorways, windows, how does this all lay out? And the priority is the improvement of the pedestrian realm and making our city even more remarkable than it is. And it brings to light the essential facts or characteristics about the site, or the patterns of use, or even the existing utilities that maybe can't be avoided or would be expensive to relocate. So we're good at helping stimulate this conversation between the design team and the commission to discuss opportunities and constraints. And I really feel it makes the hearings more productive later. So we encourage you to retain this ability for a design advice request process so that we can strengthen our city to be designed for people and support public life and design excellence. And I'd also like to take this moment of opportunity. I think Julie's gonna blush on this, but I really want to commend her leadership as she serves as the chair. She's the most organized person. She follows protocols. She enforces the timeframes in a very respectful way. We appreciate that. She works toward consensus and advice. I appreciate her clarity and professionalism and leadership, and she shows a lot of respect for staff, for the commissioners, for the applicant owners, and for the design team. So we very much appreciate the role that she's taken and the leadership that she has.
Thank you.
So I'd be happy to answer questions if you have any.
Just congratulations, Carol, on the many ways that you make our city so much more livable and beautiful. It's staggering the impact you've had on this city.
Thank you. And I
Excellent work.
moved here to do that. So,
Thank you.
Thank
Keep doing the great work.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
I did think of another question for Julia. Tell me about the community engagement process that happens. I know you reach out to neighborhood associations.
Yes, so the neighborhood association, the local business association, and neighbors within a certain radius, regardless of their tenancy, both owners and renters, receive notification when there is a new Type 3 building proposed. Also a Type 2, although the parameters change just a little bit. So there is always an opportunity to engage. Design teams will typically engage the neighborhood association at a neighborhood association meeting. And then in the hearings room, we always have an opportunity for public testimony, and we hear often from neighbors, also from members of neighborhood associations that are speaking both in support of and in opposition to proposals. So if it is a Type 2 review and something has been approved that the neighborhood does not appreciate, it will come to us. It will come to the Design Commission on appeal, and then we manage that appeal process. When something happens at the Type 3 level that is not to the liking of a neighbor or neighborhood, and there is an appeal filed, the City Council are the appeal body. So there is much opportunity for engagement and for people to voice their opinions.
I want to follow up on that a little bit. So my experience with neighborhood associations are they're not reflective of the people who live in the neighborhood. And so what's been your experience in those meetings? Have they been really reflective of the people most impacted by the
they're-
development?
That's a really good question, because the thing that we see are many different opinions. Neighborhood associations will often take a very circumspect view, a very long view of development in the neighborhood. This has been the case in the, for instance, in the Pearl District. In the Pearl District, for the last couple of decades, all development has been good development. That's not everybody who lives there feels that way anymore. Now that there are so many residential units in that neighborhood, people's priorities are changing. And so we are hearing differently from folks who aren't necessarily affiliated with the neighborhood association. There is definitely a shift happening in that neighborhood, and I think that's playing out across the city.
And are you seeing a diversity of people based on whatever is being considered at the moment?
I think that we probably are. Our hearings happen in the afternoon on Thursdays. And so, to the extent that people are able to attend, they do. And we are certainly grateful for people who take time away from their work obligations to attend hearings. We see a lot of type 2 appeals especially that are really focused on parking. And so there is a very particular age demographic that is very worried about parking. Under 35, nobody cares. But an older demographic will turn out regularly to talk about parking. And so we do see a lot of that discussion in the hearings room,
I think
especially in the neighborhoods.
Thank you for that. I guess my concern would be that if the meetings happen during the workday and they happen at a place that may not be accessible by public transit, then there are people who are impacted that just don't have access to that.
Yeah, so we are definitely workday. We are very accessible. Hearings happen in the 1900 Southwest 4th building, the BDS building. And we always accept written testimony as well, and we do receive an immense amount of written testimony. So folks know how to use the system, and we provide much instruction on how to use the system. There's a lot of information posted on BDS's website about how to do this in a way that's effective.
I think that's true for a certain demographic. I think people who are English language learners,
Yeah.
I think people who are low income, limited education, don't have the expertise that the elderly people who are showing up to demand more parking. I think that we're talking about totally different demographic groups and how they engage with government.
But I'm also going to go out on a limb here for a second. When you look at the area where the highest concentration of buildings are that are subject to the work that this commission does, they tend to be downtown.
Central City.
They tend to be buildings that have built-in constituencies, people who live downtown or work downtown or the like. And I don't mean this as a disrespect to the commission, but the people that I hear from who have real sharp concerns about the city right now are struggling to hold on to their housing, to keep their kids in school, to have a safe community, whatever. The marginal benefit of having a better design for a building that's going to be built anyway in the downtown corridor, I think is less of an urgent concern for a typical person. That's why I think we see a lot of, you have lots of frequent flyers. You have developers and design people and folks who live downtown. I mean, the city's changed a lot in the last 10 years. I get virtually no emails from people talking about design quality issues. We get the parking stuff, we get the congestion, we get
Yep.
the crime, we get the other stuff. So it'd be interesting to know what is the broader constituency for people that care about buildings that are downtown, both residential and commercial. But I'm just going to go on a limb and say I think it's probably a pretty self-selected group. Now, it doesn't mean we shouldn't make it as accessible as possible, but the people I hear from have, bread and butter, life and death issues they're worried about, and I'm guessing they're not likely to go to a commission meeting and talk about, enhanced design for a building downtown that doesn't directly affect their lives.
I think that there is truth in what you say, but anecdotally, Block 216, I think, is notable because this is the block where all the food carts are. And so when this showed up for its first design advice request, we had, I don't know how many people that speak English as a second language or maybe even a third language in the hearings room to protest this building. And that has
All
absolutely.
organized by Randy Gregg, by the way.
And this has nothing to do with design guidelines, but people saw this as a forum to protest this building. And so it was an opportunity for an immense amount of turnout, and people did organize around this. I thought it was very effective. And there was much conversation then that followed at every ensuing design advice request.
Looks like Tim Herron has a comment.
Thank you. I was going to address it to Commissioner Hardesty directly, but just something that we do with these type 2 appeals is we'll make every effort to schedule it after hours. And so usually we have a full agenda. We're booked through June right now. If we have an appeal come in, we'll set a time certain at 5 or 5:30 so that people can work their day and still be able to get to the hearing.
Thank you.
That's it.
Very good.
Great report. Who's next? Can we have maybe invite 2 people at a time?
Yes, absolutely. So next, Kurt Schultz, and then following Kurt, Chris Trable.
And I'm sorry, I'm not going to push us, but maybe we could hold off on some of our questions till the presentation is done, because I know we have some people who are on a short time frame. We have some others waiting as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be here today to talk about the design review process. I'm Kurt Schultz. I'm a principal at Sarah Architects. We just celebrated our 50th anniversary in Portland, so we've been here a while. I lead our studio that's devoted to doing multifamily housing. So that includes market rate housing and now housing with inclusionary housing for all of our Portland projects, as well as affordable housing like the new Orchard that just opened in the Jade District last week. So, and I definitely want to reiterate how awesome Carol Mayer Reed is. We've done a number of her design review projects with her, and she is really someone special. We have typically brought about 4 or 5 projects, I think, per year over the last 7 or 8 years to the Design Commission. Most of them have been multifamily housing. Some have been hotels. Some have been office. And I've always been a big supporter of the design review process. And I participated in some of the kind of work sessions on DOZA a year or 2 ago to talk about recommendations for improving the design review process. But I have always been a fan of design review. I really honestly believe that it does improve projects. And most of the projects I've seen, including a heck of a lot of my own, have been very much improved by the design review process. So I have tremendous amount of respect for the people who basically volunteer their time to do a really, really hard job that often lasts late into the night. So over the last, I would say 2 years, the focus on the 3 tenets of design excellence, context, public realm, and quality and permanence have really helped kind of sharpen the focus in the design review hearings and made the conversations a lot more helpful, I would say, to both the client developers and the design team. As opposed to years ago, sometimes our conversations would kind of go a little bit over the map. But I would say Julie in particular, I want to commend, has really done an awesome job as being chair to focus the conversation, focus the meetings, keep us on schedule, but also keep everyone in the room on task, which has been very helpful. So I've noticed that the design review hearings have been getting done in a lot quicker time. We've actually not needed as many hearings to finish the process now. But I think the most important thing that I would really hate to see ever change or be lost is the design advice request process. And that's really where we come very early to the Design Commission and we talk about urban design issues, where especially all the easy sites have been developed in Portland. All that's left is hard sites. We all know that. They're all hard. And to really figure out how are we going to support the public realm, where should main entries be, where should public areas be, retail, building orientation, solar orientation, supporting the downtown plan, those are really hard and we can't always do it alone. So having that design advice request process where we're looking at urban design issues from sometimes 1,000 to 10,000 feet is extremely important to us. I guess I would say in conclusion, I really do believe the design review process continues to improve and in my opinion is not a hindrance to development. As a matter of fact, I would say it's the exact opposite. I actually think our design review process for its duration and particularly over the last couple of years is enhancing our downtown and our built environment and actually is a catalyst by making our city and our downtown a more desirable place to develop as opposed to hindering development. I'd also be happy to answer any questions about the housing pipeline too, because it is really an interesting, challenging time, but we can hold off on that until later.
Excellent. Thank you.
Hi, Chris Trable, Chair of the Overlook Neighborhood Association.
Chris.
I was a little surprised to be invited to speak, honestly. Our experience with the Design Commission, it was on two projects. One was the Adidas campus, which has caused some heartburn among neighbors. And the other was on an appeal that we lost, so I could sit up here and rail against the Design Commission. But I'm not going to do that because they're great. I commend them on that appeal and also on Adidas, that we have a lot of residents that came to testify. And these are people that don't have expertise in design and don't have expertise in development. They were made to feel welcome, they were listened to, they were given thoughtful questions and engaged with by the commission. And so just up front, they're doing a great job in terms of engaging the neighborhood at that level. As you know, Overlook is a hot spot for development. And in terms of design overlay, we have it up and down Interstate, we have it on Killingsworth, and we have it at the Adidas campus. And I've heard several people today so far talk about the value of the design advice request process and that it allows developers to learn and hear from the Design Commission. What I want to say is it also gives residents an opportunity to engage in the process at an early stage, to learn about projects and to provide useful input. This was particularly true with the Adidas project. Adidas made changes to their plans based on what neighbors presented at the design advice request. And that is a process that I encourage you to continue to support. Now I am going to, although I am speaking nicely about the Design Commission, do have a couple of, not necessarily criticisms, but ideas of ways to improve it. One element that we experienced on the appeal was that a lot of what the Design Commission does is subjective. What does fit in with the character of a neighborhood? What is a good design versus a bad design? And the presentation on appeal relies on photographs presented by both sides. And, we can both present photos that show the neighborhood, how it fits, how it doesn't fit. I would encourage the Design Commission to do field trips, do an outing to the neighborhood, to the site, to actually see what the community around a project looks like so that there is a better sense and everybody is working from the same framework in the conversation of what fits well with the neighborhood. The other thing I want to draw your attention to is in the design overlay zone amendments. In the highlights, it's item 5A. It's a part of the code at 377150.B.3, and this does have to do with the commission. What it does is require that the public, the at-large member of the commission, there's one right now, not be someone who works in the listed development positions. It lists things like landscape architects being added, architect, things like that. Those are things that need to be on the commission. But I think there is value in having a member of the public on the commission who is not from one of those fields and is from the neighborhoods and can present issues and review them and engage in the conversation through a different lens. In my experience talking to the commission, at times it has felt like they were an insider club where they had their architects speak and they had their perspectives that didn't necessarily mesh with the approach and the viewpoints of the neighborhood. I think that voice, putting that in the code and requiring it to be there is important. I would even encourage you to require that there be two people on the commission who can bring that perspective. One other thing. One other experience we've had in terms of these reviews is that staff, when they issue decisions on proposals, in our experience, have been erring on the side of doing what the developers want in terms of granting modifications or exceptions. That puts the neighbors who will be impacted by a project at a disadvantage if there is an appeal, because they have to go to the commission to seek to overturn a recommendation by staff. And they're not experts. It's really hard for neighbors to engage at that level. I would suggest that staff shift their perspective and require the developers to make the appeals, because that then puts them on the defensive, or well, the offense, whatever, however the sports metaphor would work there, but would make them overturn and justify why an exception is appropriate, as opposed to making the neighbors try and explain why it's not appropriate. That said, the last thing I want to leave you with is kudos to staff. In our experience, working with the development department on these design projects has been outstanding. All of the staff members we've engaged with take the time to talk to neighbors, whether or not they're from the neighborhood association or just people that I say, hey, you need to go talk to the planners on this. They answer questions, they return phone calls. They are just great to work with, and I think that there is incredible value in that neighbors then come to the process more informed because staff makes them more informed. That's it. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hursti.
Thank you. The website says that the commission must include a representative of the Regional Arts and Cultural Council, one person representing the public at large, and 5 members experienced in either design, engineering, finance, construction, or management of buildings and land development. It also says that no more than 2 members may be appointed from any one of those areas of expertise. I absolutely support the need to have community members, and I would say community members that are just thinking individuals, not necessarily connected to any neighborhood association. I also believe that we should have material and languages that people need. And I think anytime you say that you are a representative of the public and the meetings happen during the day, you limit who has the ability to participate. So all due respect to the great work that I know that you're doing, I just don't think we can call ourselves a public body if only insiders have the opportunity to participate.
Commissioner, while you were out of the room, Tim Herring came up and pointed out that when they have appeals, they do schedule them after 5.
I was gone then, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, but you have to actually know what's going on in order to be able to fully participate, like the gentleman from Overlook said. I just think there's an unequal balance of power. If you're the expert and you're holding meetings with other experts, then it's easy to lose regular community members in that process. And so I know I've been to meetings where it only takes one meeting for you to feel like, clearly they don't want your opinion, and then you just don't come back.
Yeah, point taken, and we are doing everything that we can to mitigate that.
Thank you.
Very good.
Next to testify, thank you both very much. Next to testify, Dan Zalko from PSU and Dorothy Ferris from Methuen.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler and members of City Council. My name is Dan Zalko, and I oversee the Real Estate and Transportation Division at Portland State University. I was asked by city staff to come here because we've had a few projects over the last few years, and without them having any knowledge of my opinion of the design review process or commission, so I commend them on that. So you have no idea.
By the way, Dan, if you're starting to go rogue, we do have Carla's going to cut you off, and we'll have you back for something else.
Sounds good. I've had experience with the design review process for 4 large projects over the last 6 years. And between 4 and 6 years ago, I would have told you that I think the system is flawed and needs significant improvement. However, not only do I not think that now, I think the process is very good. It helps make projects better, and it ensures that we, as owners, are paying close attention to the impact of our projects on the public realm, that our projects will look good for not only immediately, but for a long time, and that they fit well in their setting. Over the last few years, I have noticed significant improvement. City staff and the commission have increasingly become more helpful and predictable. It used to be that on a single project between a design advice request and a land use review hearing, or between two land use review hearings, you would get conflicting feedback, and you would get new feedback on aspects of your project that you had previously been told were fine. That has not been the case in recent years. Design advice requests had been seen as a waste of time because of how conflicting the opinions you might get from one to another. Not only is that no longer the case as well, but they now help owners tremendously ensure a successful and timely process. Between city staff and commission facilitation by the chair, feedback is collected now in a very organized and constructive way. It also used to be that cost and building performance didn't seem to matter, and some commissioners even specifically said that. Now there has been vocal consideration for both of those factors. The only suggestions I have now are that the city and commission be even more open to different and creative design, allowing architects to push the envelope. Also, there are, of course, always process improvements that could be made, and because of that, it's important that there is always an easy way for customers and clients to provide feedback on the process, and that the feedback is actively reviewed by someone who has the authority and interest in making continuous improvements. In closing, I'd like to thank the commission and city staff for the great work they do and their dedication to making the city a better place to live, work, visit, and of course, learn, while also being very respectful and helpful to the challenging work of developing property.
Dan, just would you remind us, when do you expect to cut the ribbon on your new building?
October 31st, 2020.
Very good, thank you.
Hello, I'm Dorothy Ferris, Principal and Landscape Architect at Methuen. We have offices in Seattle, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. And I want to thank you all for the opportunity to be here on behalf of Methuen and as a representative of the landscape architecture discipline. Over 20 years ago, I moved to Portland from the middle of the country to attend college. And Portland was the first city I lived in that had a real walkable urban environment. And in many ways, those years in Portland, independent from my family, shaped my perception of how great cities should be designed. And it's through exposure to Pioneer Square, Park Blocks, the Keller Fountain Park, and others that I was even introduced to the profession of landscape architecture and the idea of designed public spaces for people. And the improvements made to the city since then with Directors Park, Tanner Springs, Jameson, I could go on, illustrate Portland's great commitment to excellent public open spaces. So I consider myself really lucky to have the opportunity as a design professional to contribute to Portland's evolving and dynamic environment, and it's an opportunity I take seriously and hope that the city's thoughtful design and attention to the natural environment will continue to inspire future generations. So with Methuen, I have participated as part of an integrated design team on the design review of 3 projects in the last 4 years. Heartline, which opened this past fall, the Oregonian Press Blocks, and most recently the Pepsi Blocks planned development, all of which support significant public open space. Our office practices across the country, and I've been involved in design review processes in multiple cities, primarily in the West Coast, and I can say with experience that Portland's process is unique in its interactive and collaborative approach, especially early in the design. Applicants have an opportunity to not only present their projects, but also engage commissioners in a thoughtful conversation about how the design creatively recognizes the context and contributes to the overall success. Unlike other municipalities, and multiple opportunities for conversation with the design commission and the thoroughness of the application can produce projects of high caliber without surprises or unexpected deviations. As a designer focused primarily on the public realm, the early design advice is especially essential to producing more thoughtful designs, providing feedback on conceptual approach, programming, and pedestrian connectivity, with time to incorporate them before the details are developed. This is key to projects remaining cost-effective and on schedule. Through the DAR process on Heartline, one of the images you see on the screen, the overall project was greatly improved. The project proposed early to build 2 buildings, office and residential, over below-grade parking with a public open space between. And when we presented to the Design Commission our early designs, they challenged us on how we were addressing B4, providing stopping and viewing spaces, B5, make plaza, parks, and open spaces successful, and C6, develop transitions between buildings and public spaces. I actually went back and looked at the notes. as well as emphasizing A2 Portland themes. So with this feedback, we went back and did a pretty major redesign of the public open space between the two buildings, developing the logjam concept that influenced design decisions and site furnishings, inspired the art that was added to the project. It created more outdoor gathering spaces of varying scales, including the bocce court that also works as stormwater treatment. All of these were design innovations and improvements we made because of that early DAR feedback and have led to a more successful project. Had we received these comments later in the design, it would have been much more difficult and costly to incorporate the design changes. And I was just there earlier before coming here and was, again, surprised to see how well used the space is. It supported much more people in there than it would have supported with the original design. So the success of this process is really also due in large part to our great partners, not only our client Security Properties, but also the committed BDS staff who work willingly with us to streamline and facilitate the application, and the collaborative attitude and varied experiences of the design commissioners who also contribute to the process. They bring an awareness of design and development challenges and an interest in protecting the city's high caliber of design. For Pepsi Blocks, this was especially true as we were all navigating a planned development for the first time. The DAR process allowed us to test locations for a required open space, connections, where to step the building massing, and set us up well for the first phase of vertical development, which we are just starting. So over the last few years of my experience with the design review process, I have seen it improve with more clarity on deliverables, decisions, and the efficiency of the hearings. And since much of my work is within the pedestrian portion of the right-of-way, I would offer some recommendations to further improve the efficiency and efficacy of them. To formally tie land use review processes and public works permits to synchronize responses from PBOT and BES, to consider requiring attendance by PBOT decision makers at DARs and LUR meetings when the right-of-way is subject to review, and similarly to recommend BDS staff presence at Public Works permits reviews to speak to the goals of the commission and hear concerns from PBOT. Bert Gregory, a design partner at Methuen, spoke in October. He made the same recommendations because I gave him those at that time too, and I still stand by those as important considerations. Much of the nuance in the public realm is important, and much of the nuance of the public realm, is important that everyone be aware of it, both BES, PBOT, the Design Commission. So while the design review process is not easy, it's not altogether complicated. It requires the applicants to be respectful, prepared, dedicated, and thorough in their decisions. But shouldn't every city require those qualities and those responsible for the future built form in urban environments? As I have seen and participated in, the results of this rigor speak to the city's commitment to build places that will last for decades to come. The attention to detail, the fundamental moves, set up projects and neighborhoods for long-term success. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just give you a little shout out for the project on the right?
Oh.
I believe the street to the west is 11th?
Yes, Heartline project. We are between 12th and 13th.
13th? Mm-hmm. And one thing about this project that I think is very distinctive is even though there's a residential tower that's on the right of the slide that's before us,
Right.
the commercial structure that you built on the design on the left actually mirrors the same height and some of the historic elements of the historic structures on the other side of the street. So the street one to the west has a certain kind of context and continuity. And in the middle of the project and bordered by this, the eastern end is the tower. And I thought that was a very effective way of dividing it up and preserving some of the historical character of of 13th.
Oh, thank you for saying that. That was very intentional, very carefully thought through and presented and discussed with the Design Commission. The desire to speak to the historic neighborhood, that we were just cat-a-corner from the actual zone that is under historic preservation, but also speaking to the developing neighborhood in North Pearl and some of the materiality used there.
Thank you. Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you very much for being here. Julie, a number of your testifiers have expressed support for the design advice review and concern about it. Is there some suggestion it might be going away?
Thank you for asking this question. So the DOZA discussion draft is circulating right now. And one of the and this is a discussion draft on the design overlay zoning amendments to code. And it is suggesting a couple of tracts for the design advice request, and one of them is its elimination. And I think that there's been a lot of concern in the development community that it might be eliminated. The initial DOZA report that was generated by Mark Hinshaw of Walker Macy 2 years ago recommended that the design advice request be made mandatory for projects in the central city, in large part for, many of the reasons that you've heard here today, but also, just because it gives us the opportunity to daylight really significant proposals really early in the process and invite the community in. So that just the fact that that might go away is worrisome.
And does the Design Commission vote on recommending the DOZA changes to council?
We don't vote.
Does the planning?
We respond, and we are in fact sending the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability a letter today that outlines our thoughts on the DOZA discussion draft.
So, and since it would be a code change, it would be the Planning and Sustainability Commission that would forward it to us, and you will advocate for what you've heard here today, I'm sure.
My hope is there is the opportunity for testimony in front of Planning and Sustainability Commission.
Thank you.
Yes.
Well, this certainly will be in front of councils.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you. Appreciate it very much. Thanks for all the great work you're doing.
Is that?
Great. That's it. That's all we've got.
I will entertain
Mayor,
a
I
motion.
move to accept the report.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fish, a second from, I'll call it a tie,
And Commissioner Hardesty can have.
Commissioner Hardesty and Commissioner Fritz. Please call the roll.
Fish,
Well, to Julie Livingston and to the commission and to the staff, congratulations on another terrific report to council. I wish all of our annual reports were this interesting and this well done, but, and I also appreciate that you invited some people from the public without screening to come and testify. That's a very brave thing to do. Not typically how we structure hearings, but I give you a lot of credit for doing that. I wrote down something that our friend from Sarah Architect said. He said that the design commission process is, quote, "not a hindrance to development." And I think that's important because early in my tenure on this council, when there was a different attitude, let's say, about planning and about process and about some of our design guidelines, there was talk of substantially relaxing these rules or doing away with some of these processes. And there was a lot of pushback in some parts of the development community. I'm pleased that we have evolved from that to the point now where even your critics are coming in saying you're doing a great job, but here's where we might, you might do better. That speaks very highly for the work that you're doing at the leadership level and obviously the great staff that you have. I just want to say something about design. There is a tendency, I think, in cities to view design as somehow the province of elites. And in fact, there is a fairly, in my view, in my experience, self-selected group of people that, are especially interested in design. But I can't think of anything that's more democratic than challenging developers who are building in our community, often as of right, to actually build so that we can be proud of the finished product and that our city is enhanced and elevated through their work. This city belongs to all of us. And, there was a period, and there still is a period, particularly I think with multifamily housing, where a lot of crap has gone up. And we found a certain model, and we followed it relentlessly, and we've had a lot of misses. And I won't go through my highlights in terms of parts of the city where that's especially acute. But when we are intentional about what a city looks like, we build civic pride. We build for not just tomorrow, but for 100 years. There's a report out recently that says that the greener the county, the more likely there's less Medicare spending. Isn't that interesting? Less healthcare costs, other kinds of things. So when we're green and intentional, people are healthier. I think when the city design is more beautiful and more intentional and more contextual and more respectful of its environment, I think we all feel differently about our city, a different level of pride, and that's a very democratic thing. So at the end of the day, we're building for a city that 100 years ago, we're going to look back and say, did we get it right or not? And I have watched with great interest over the last 10 years your reports, and in my opinion, and I said this to you at the beginning of the hearing, I think through the collaborative work of the Design Commission, we are pushing the design envelope and getting better product. We're getting buildings that are more interesting. And the built environment reflects that, and that will be to our benefit over time. So I'm very pleased with what you're doing. I'm grateful for all the time that you're putting into this, you and your volunteer commissioners, and I'm very pleased today to accept the report. Aye.
Hardesty?
I want to greatly appreciate your leadership as chair, Julia, and the fine people who are serving on the committee with you. You may have the record for the number of meetings that any volunteer group who gets together on behalf of the city, the amount of time that you spend. My comments in regard to who are you responsive to are in no way meant to diminish the work that you're doing. But as we in the city continue to say we engage everybody and we're open to everybody, but yet if the meeting happens downtown and it happens at 1:30 in the afternoon and there's not language translation and we haven't actually put out a fact sheet that's in plain English so that, or whatever other language, so that people who are not architects or designers or et cetera, understand it, then we really are not engaging the community in a meaningful way. And so I think you've done some great work. I love the designs, but when people tell me that they have been inclusive and they have engaged the community, and then I ask those questions, and then people say, no, we actually haven't done that part, then I'm concerned. Because for me, I want to make sure that everybody who has an interest has an opportunity to weigh in. And I think regardless of whether or not you have expertise on building designs, you know what you would like to walk by every day. You know where you would like to go and have a coffee or hang out with your friends. And so I don't think any voice should be minimized in that process. And so I vote aye. Thank you.
Fritz?
Thank you for your report and thank you for your leadership. I think when the first report, you said 7 years we've been doing these reports, it didn't used to be where everybody would come in and say, this is a great process, we really appreciate it, look at the great results we've got. And I do think a lot of that is due to your leadership and your example. So thank you so much for that. And your reports, as Commissioner Fisk said, are always interesting. When I read it last night, I went to the website, and this is not for you, this is for the Bureau of Technology Services via the staff. It's really hard to find your website. You have to look under information and then boards and commissions and then Design Commission. You're a really important group. And so it would be, I hope that when we do the refresh of the Portland website, that it'll be a lot easier to find the information, because as you know, you have done things like a welcoming sign that explains how to do testimony. You have done things like telling people how they can get language translation, etc. And I very much appreciate that. My colleagues may know that back in March, I did a meeting to talk about the Commission on Disability, and I was roundly criticized for holding it at the Office of Equity and Human Rights, which is downtown on the west side. And so we did a doodle poll to find out where should we have the next meeting, and we offered the Immigrant and Refugee Community Organization in East Portland, we offered the Unite Oregon building on Killingsworth, and we offered the 1900 building, and the 1900 building won as the most accessible place to get to by transit. As somebody who's transit dependent, I know that getting downtown is a lot easier than having to transfer and get elsewhere. And I do appreciate Tim Heron's point that for hearings that where public testimony is expected, a lot of it, that you hold them after 5. And that's a long set of hearings if you're starting at 1:30 and then continuing on into the evening. And I know you sometimes serve hours and hours. So again, thank you for that. When I was campaigning for the cannabis tax in 2016. I visited the 25 neighborhood associations, and I was really delighted to see the diversity of people participating, a lot of renters, a lot of people of color, and a lot of young people. And so I appreciated the comment that it's often the neighborhood association folks who have done several of these, so they're not just reacting to the one that's next door that has no parking, that somebody's coming in, and that people can come in. We also have community experts like those in Overlook who know that you can't actually complain about the lack of parking because it's not required. You can talk about the context of the neighborhood, how the building is going to work, and I think that's the value. I certainly support keeping the design advice request process. It seems like as long as the volunteers can continue to manage putting in those extra hours, it's really working well. And so thank you very much for all that you do, and I vote aye.
Wheeler.
Well, I'll just heap on the praise along with my colleagues here. First of all, thank you for the excellent presentation, and I hope a lot of people have the opportunity to see it and be inspired by the great work that the Design Commission is doing. Again, I want to thank everybody on the commission. Julie, thank you for your stalwart leadership. And again, I hope whatever meager praise we can offer today compensates for the lousy pay. But in all seriousness, as I looked through your slide deck presentation, these are some of the most iconic spaces in our community already. And some of them have either just come online and some haven't come online yet, but you can just tell that they are going to be iconic contributors to the community. And I love the fact that you're always thinking not just about the building, but you're thinking about the community and how the flow of traffic works on at the street level. You're thinking about activation, you're thinking about public access, you're thinking even about wastewater management, all the environmental issues. And all of these designs, I think, really speak to the values of this community. So I just want to acknowledge that. I want to thank you. We're all really pleased with the work you're doing. I vote aye, the report's accepted, and we'll look forward to what you do in the future. I'm sure it'll only continue to impress. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Carla, next item is Resolution 390. Could you please read it?
Authorize the submittal of enterprise zone application to the state of Oregon to reauthorize the Portland Enterprise Zone.
Colleagues, the Enterprise Zone or E-Zone program has been one of the city's most powerful tools to spur capital investment by companies while leveraging opportunities for both employment and skills training for local residents and communities. The E-Zone advances many of the city's objectives, emphasizing traded sector jobs, maximizing our economic competitiveness, and striving to create prosperity for all Portlanders. 2 years ago, we approved an E-Zone policy that asked companies to do more for the community in exchange for the property tax abatements that they derive. Those changes have been received, and they've received emphatic support from the private sector, and it reflects what I hope are the values that are broadly held in this city. We want to ensure that the equitable economy benefits both business and residents. Public benefits have been built into the E-Zone program and have prompted numerous conversations locally, regionally, nationally, and internationally. Portland, I believe, continues to set a strong standard for realizing public benefits in exchange for tax incentives. Today's proposed action would ensure our ability to maintain one of the most important tools in promoting shared economic prosperity. We have many companies here who want to and already do good works for our community. Extending the Portland E-Zone for another 10 years allows us to continue a platform that provides community benefits that bring business, government, and the local community together to tackle some of our most difficult societal programs. First of all, I appreciate your patience. Our last item went over a little bit because we were so excited about it, but I thank you for being here, and I'll turn it over to our chairperson, Tavo.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners. I'm Tavo Cruz, Chair of Prosper Portland's Board of Commissioners. I'm glad to be here today to present the board's recommendation to reauthorize the Portland Enterprise Zone, one of the city's most powerful tools to create and grow jobs and income. As a member of the Prosper Portland Commission and former chair of the Hispanic Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce and an attorney who works with local businesses at all stages, I'm acutely aware of the critical role that innovative partnerships play in the success of our local economy. Our presentation today is intended to provide a look back at the last 10 years of partnership and innovation within the Enterprise Zone program, and to set forward a path for the next 10 years of programming at the City of Portland and Prosper Portland. Prosper Portland focuses our work on building an equitable economy, especially for communities of color and those who have been historically underserved based on geography or income profile. The E-Zone program has been a testing ground for numerous innovations across the organization. To achieve these goals, we are committed to a continual evolution in learning and to operating in an equitable, innovative, and financially sustainable way. Through your action today, we hope to continue the use of the E-Zone tool to advance our objectives. With that, I'll turn it over to our Executive Director, Kimberly Branham.
Thank you, Chair Cruz. Good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler, Commissioners. I'm delighted to be here today to provide an update on what we've been able to achieve over the last 10 years and some of the things that we have learned and implemented as a result of that learning, and to talk about how the program has evolved over the last 10 years. Then I'm going to hand it over to Andy Reed, my colleague who manages the enterprise zones here at Prosper Portland. So the program has been in place since 1986 and was most recently reauthorized in 2008. The slide shows some of the benchmarks that we've achieved over time in terms of evolving the program. So I'll point out a few. In 2010, when Andy took over the program, he really assessed and reorganized the program administration to make it more focused on customer service. We also reduced the amount of kind of red tape that was necessary before, and made it easier for small businesses to engage. And so you'll see that, that there's been an increase in small businesses accessing the program. In 2012, we established the East Portland E-Zone, bringing in property east of Cesar Chavez to the border of Gresham and increasing job creation opportunities throughout East Portland. The East Portland Enterprise Zone will be back to you for reauthorization consideration in 2022. Most recently, with the adoption of Prosper Portland's 2015 to 2020 strategic plan and its focus on creating widely shared prosperity, we've adjusted this program to help deliver on some of our major priorities, including increasing access to quality employment. And I just want to emphasize that this is probably our most significant tool to increase access to employment. We have a number of programs that really support local entrepreneurs. This is about ultimately creating quality employment opportunities, particularly middle income quality jobs. We also do try to make sure that we're increasing wealth creation for diverse local entrepreneurs and encouraging community business partnerships. In 2015, for example, we began requiring companies to provide childcare or transit support for their employees if realizing more than $1 million in tax savings, understanding that even if you're making $42,000 a year or at $42,000 a year, childcare and transportation can be significant burdens for employees. And in 2017, we added the public benefit agreement requirement that Mayor Wheeler mentioned for all program participants as a requirement to ensure that we actually achieve the desired impact of the program. Since then, 10 companies have entered into public benefit agreements, and our learning from this approach is being applied to programs like Portland Means Progress Initiative, where we're engaging with companies who aren't receiving tax abatements or incentives in order to diversify their employees and procure from local diverse entrepreneurs. So we are here before you requesting reauthorization for the next 10 years. We are not recommending or requesting any amendments to the policy since it was most recently adopted in 2017. We're still believe that the policy is sound. So this map in front of you shows visually the Portland Enterprise Zone, which is in brown, and the East Portland Enterprise Zone, which is in blue. You'll note that many of the city's industrially and commercially zoned properties in North and Northeast Portland and Outer East are within one of the two enterprise zones. I'll also note that while we do have two enterprise zones, the expectations and experiences are meant to be identical, so there's one policy for both. So if you're a business, you probably don't know which enterprise zone you are in. As we look toward the next 10 years, we thought it would be helpful to look back at the last 10 years to see what we've accomplished, what the program has accomplished. And during this period, we've supported 90 projects with 53 active now from both enterprise zones. You'll be hearing from one of those firms, McKenna Metal, shortly. By simplifying the program, we now see that 36% of the businesses that are active today are small businesses, and we define those as businesses that have 50 or fewer employees. If we define small businesses as those that have 100 or fewer employees, which is the definition in some contexts, we would go up to almost 50% of the businesses meeting that definition. This map highlights the locations of investments and jobs that are created in industrial and commercial locations throughout the city. Investments in East Portland have picked up steadily since the creation of the East Portland Enterprise Zone in 2012. Some of those have included manufacturers of products, such as granola bars, foam mattresses, and pharmaceuticals to help people with diabetes. Other areas of significant investment include Rivergate in the north, Swan Island, Northwest Industrial Area, and the Central East Side. Our three largest investments, which you see in blue, come in from Vigor Industrial's dry dock, Daimler's headquarter expansion, and Campotex distribution facility. Drilling down further, here is a list of those companies that had an active exemption in place from 2015 to 2018. Those noted in bold are smaller businesses that have 50 or fewer employees, new companies who are not yet listed because they're not currently exempted but will be in 2019, include Salt and Straw, City of Roses and Recycling, Cook Security Group, Adparents, Gunderson, and Nosa Familia. We currently have an additional 9 projects in the pipeline that have finished a new E-zone application and have begun investments with the anticipated exemptions to begin in 2020. So during that same period of 2015 to 2018, the Portland Enterprise Zone catalyzed a total of more than $1 million in investments, with $672 million for expansions of Daimler and Vigor Industrial, Salt and Straw, Olympia Provisions, Instrument Marketing, Simple Finance, and others, and over $350 million in purchases for goods and services inside the City of Portland boundaries. Starting in 2017, the public benefit agreements have specific efforts and requirements to procure from entrepreneurs of color, utilizing both the Inclusive Business Resource Network and Mercatus Collective as vehicles to support local diverse businesses and to create connections. So over the next few years, we will be able to disaggregate these numbers by race and ethnicity and geography. We don't currently have that information, but we will going forward. That investment.
I'm sorry, please say that again, the last sentence.
Yeah, so we don't currently have information disaggregated by race or ethnicity in terms of who benefited from the $365 million in local procurement, but we will have that as a requirement going forward for businesses who began with us post 2017.
You knew I was going to ask that question, didn't you? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's important, and we want to have that information, and so we've included it in the policy.
And what about who's getting the jobs?
Yeah,
You
so
have
that
demographic information?
we don't have that right now. We can back into some assumptions, but now that we have public benefit agreements as a requirement, we're going to be able to dig in further. So that investment led to significant new employment opportunities, the majority of which are middle-wage, high-quality jobs. Projects active in 2017, which is the most recent verified data that we have, we're just getting the 2018 data now, created 2,834 new jobs post-enrollment in the program. And we've seen average total compensation rise, both as a result of increased wage requirements within the policy and a tighter labor pool that is creating competition and therefore increased salaries for employees. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andy to discuss how the program works, the process ahead, and some proposed boundary amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you, Mayor Wheeler and commissioners. The question of how the program works, we aim to deliver benefits to the community, business, and the city through numerous methods. To start with the value to the community, both residents and employees at companies, they're really benefiting in a number of different ways. And to highlight a few of those, you see a number on the screen here. We have a wage floor of $15 an hour. Companies pay 15% of their actual tax savings as well, and that gets moved into an economic development fund, which is used to support a number of programs across the city. We're going to get into that in the next couple slides. All new companies will be providing equity training inside their companies. That's a big step for us. Additionally, we now have good faith efforts to increase the goods and services purchased within Portland, but also now specifically owned by people of color and in priority neighborhoods. The next layer of that, though, is what Kimberly was referring to, which is our public benefit agreement model, which there are going to be between 2 and 6 additional community engagements by company based on a variety of factors, the size of investment and so on. And those are going to include things such as creating diversity hiring plans, pro bono services for entrepreneurs of color and women, and creating pipelines and opportunities for youth of color from our high schools in Portland. And lastly, companies do yearly compliance. With Prosper Portland, Multnomah County, Business Oregon, and the Department of Revenue, we take it very seriously. And when companies are not in compliance, then we disqualify projects. And so onto the value of business. We believe that the value to business and community is shared in this program. The competitiveness of business and the health of the community are really tied together. And so to that question of competitiveness, businesses that join the program can receive a 5-year tax exemption only on the new capital investment. So the existing land, buildings, personal property that are on the tax rolls continue to be taxed. It's only the new incremental investment. And apart from the financial incentive, we believe that businesses are benefiting in a number of other ways through workforce development programming, boosts to their public image, and a better business culture that lead to a diversified workforce and employee retention. Interestingly, site selectors from around the United States have commented that we have more requirements than any other jurisdiction they've worked with in the country. They also have said that the public benefit model is a Portland brand. This really fits with who we are. And because we've created a clear set of expectations with a return on investment back to the business, they will continue to send projects our way. So it's encouraging. We've pushed the envelope and they keep saying yes. In terms of the value proposition of what we're getting in exchange for those tax exemptions, moving from the business culture change and public benefit conversation, we see a number of financial impacts as part of what we've been able to achieve collectively. So in exchange for $6.5 million in foregone tax revenue to the city over the last 4 years, in addition to the procurement and job creation we've already talked about, we anticipate that 4 years created $36 million in Oregon income tax revenue, $2.75 million in workforce training business development fund money that goes back into our communities, which we'll talk about in the next slide. And over the years, we've done a bunch of analysis, and we believe that the financial payback to local jurisdictions is about 5 years after the incentive comes back on the tax rolls. And that's apart from, again, the numbers that we're seeing here.
Commissioner Hardesty has a question.
Thank you. Before you go to the next slide, would you tell me what public benefit agreements with 100+ engagements, what does that mean?
So when you pull together for every single company, everything from the wage requirements to the transit support to the working with the local schools to the local procurement, you add all of those up, and there are numbers of engagements that are occurring between these businesses. So you could have 15 public benefit agreements, and all 15 of those companies have an agreement with the local public school to engage kids in doing tours or internships or things like that. So that's what we mean by engagements.
And another question on the public benefit agreements. What's the process? Are they the same?
Yes, they're the same. So they're the same in terms of we have a menu that we have approved. Each company gets to select from the menu that meets the business need. The menu was created by working with about 100 different nonprofit leaders across the city over a year and a half to ask them what they would want to see in terms of business engagement.
And is it an annual review of whether or not we're meeting the public benefit agreement, or is that something that happens on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. So I just want to add to your first question and augment what Andy said, which is that the menu is the same, but depending on the level of abatement, your expectations increase. So a business that's receiving $500,000 has a lower expected public benefit agreement than somebody who's receiving $5 million in tax savings. But yes, the companies put in annual reports. The team reviews them. They review them very strictly. And so if we're not meeting objectives, then there will be conversations. And if there are not efforts made to address it, then they could be disqualified, which means that they no longer have the ability to receive the tax exemption.
And Kimberly, do you think that you get good information waiting an entire year, or whether there should be quarterly check-ins to make sure that you're on target?
That's a great question. I think that there are more frequent engagements, but I'm not sure that do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, we have relationships with these businesses, and we do look at it as a relationship model. And what we're seeing is in these engagements around public benefits, there's a business need there. If they have a diversity hiring plan, it's because they need to diversify their workforce. And they're aware of that. And so as our project managers are on the ground, whether it's the cluster leads or in our Inclusive Business Resource Network, we are moving to a quarterly model where we're checking in on the various points where they do need interventions.
I would highly encourage and support that, because my experience with the city of Portland is we wait for the end and then we get excuses as to why we didn't reach the goal, and then there are no consequences for that behavior. So I'm glad to see that you have built in, if you're not meeting the goals, then you will no longer be part of the program.
Yeah. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And Commissioner, one of the values and one of the reasons that we're so appreciative of City Council amending the policy in 2017 is that beforehand, because it was public benefit agreements were not part of the policy, we couldn't use that as a tool. So it's really helpful now.
So in terms of how this fits within the overall economic development programming in the city and at Prosper Portland, and diving further into our economic development programs not restricted by traditional tax increment finance districts, this graph shows our 4 major business lines and how general fund are leveraged with other non-TIF resources. So from top to bottom, these include obviously workforce development, Inclusive Business Resource Network, Neighborhood Prosperity Networks, Venture Portland, and traded sector business development initiatives. All told, we have approximately 40 different nonprofits in the community that are receiving funds connected to the Enterprise Zone program and helping us to deliver on our priorities as a city. And so moving to the requests before you, the program started in 1985 through the Oregon legislature, and we've had significant support at the state level for many, many years. There are 70 enterprise zones across the state of Oregon. It's being used extensively, and many of our partner cities and counties see the E-zone as the only significant investment tool to attract new business and encourage growth by existing firms. Each designation is for 10 years, and our current E-zone will expire in 2 months without action today. And so, just like with previous E-zone authorizations, we're held to standards as described in the slide when seeking out a new authorization. We have criteria around state income poverty standards. There are statutory limits, all kinds of rules in place on who and what areas can receive an enterprise zone. It has to be located in or near low-income areas with the intent of creating workforce opportunities near those individuals that need them the most. And it has to be authorized by a local city council and the Port of Portland in our case. And so here you see our proposed enterprise zone map for the next 10 years. We had multiple meetings with taxing jurisdiction partners and identified alignment in economic development priorities amongst our partners. Then during that process, we determined a list of properties that met those priorities. And technically, because we have a 12 square mile limit for the enterprise zone, the Portland Enterprise Zone, not all the properties we were looking at with our partners could fit within that boundary. So those that were selected for this amendment here has to fit within that 12 square mile boundary limit, as well as those who received consensus by our taxing jurisdiction partners.
So the two that jump out for me here are number 8, the Adidas campus, and number 10, Broadway corridor. And could you go back one slide? Be located in or near a low-income area. So let's go forward. Let's go forward again. What is the rationale under that criteria for both the Adidas campus and the Broadway corridor?
So I can speak to Broadway corridor. I think the Adidas campus was a request that came through Bureau of Planning and Sustainability and was in line with the desire to have employment opportunities in some of the in some of the key areas that were either rezoned or that hadn't been within the enterprise zone. So within Broadway corridor, while we anticipate having a robust community benefit agreement with all developers who engage with us in that opportunity, we would like to have a tool to have a direct contractual relationship with major employers who would engage and who would potentially locate within Broadway corridor. So we think that it is a good opportunity in order to do that. And so that was the thinking, is to make sure that we are able to secure public benefits.
And so what is the low-income census or tract or neighborhood that in essence grandfathers the Broadway corridor in? So it's either in or adjacent to. What's the district that we cite to?
So Broadway corridor is right between Old Town Chinatown and the Pearl District. Old Town Chinatown is has one of the lowest per capita incomes within the city. And so it's generally I think it's probably proximity to that area that provides us with that.
With the statutory hook?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you. That begs another question. So with the president's federal giveaway of money to rich people who want to invest in downtown Portland, are we allowing companies to double dip in a way that they get double the benefit for half the investment that we want or need them to make in this community?
So I have a lot of outstanding questions about what the impact of the Opportunity Zone program will be. Unlike the E-Zone, as you well know, there are no requirements in terms of what happens. And so what we've seen in California and other places is actually a desire to have a layering effect so that you have the equivalent of the E-Zone and the Opportunity Zone, so that so that you actually have a kind of a hook for wage or job creation. So my assumption would be that if a company was participating in the E-Zone as well as receiving an investment through an opportunity fund, that might be a positive. But I don't know right now.
That's the argument that I would make. I would make that we have no control without the E-Zone.
Yes.
And with the E-Zone, we could set some boundaries so
Yes.
people aren't just taking the wealth out of our community.
Yeah, I think that's probably true.
So just to wrap up the presentation here, across the board, we believe that these additions are in alignment with the comprehensive plan as well as with our partners' objectives around growing quality jobs. So our request in front of you today is that City Council reauthorize the Portland Enterprise Zone for another 10 years and direct staff to submit an application to the state of Oregon. This is the final step of resolution processes, Port of Portland, Prosper Portland Commission, as well as meetings with taxing jurisdiction partners. This is the final step of that process. From here, we move to the application to the state of Oregon, Business Oregon, for the final process by June 30.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Commissioner Fritz has a question.
Thank you. If the Oregon legislature moves forward with the prevailing wage bill, what impact would that have on E-zones, enterprise zones?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's a House Bill 2048, 2040.
48.
Give or take. Anyway, so something that has proposed that for projects that are over $20 million, that they would trigger prevailing wage. We did reach out to some of our partners to understand what the impact would be. And I would say that it's challenging to get that information. And so we haven't taken a position either way on that because we just don't feel like we can speak to it. And so we're not sure. The estimates when you look at it over time in terms of what prevailing wage can add to projects, really depends on the complexity of the project. So if it's already steel and concrete, then it generally will, it won't be that big of a jump. If it's a wood frame building, then it might be as much as a 40% increase on the labor costs. But that's usually about 20% of the overall project cost. So, doing the math, it shouldn't be that significant of an investment. But I think we just don't know yet. There are a number of smaller localities that are very concerned about that.
Yeah, I'm on the League of Cities board on
Yes.
behalf of the city, and it's
Yeah.
universally opposed. It's
Yes.
a great
Yes.
concern to the smaller communities.
Yes. And that might have a more significant impact within those communities.
I would say that it would have a huge impact here too. If we're trying to get young people into union wage jobs and we have to start off paying them prevailing wage, that is one of the reasons why we continue to fail in our programs and getting people through apprenticeship programs in the city of Portland. Because as soon as they get to a certain hour in the pre-apprenticeship or apprenticeship, they just don't get called anymore because it just costs too much to continue that process. Or people say it costs too much, but the bottom line is that if people aren't at the journeyman status, at a journeyman level, just having a rule that says you're required to have prevailing wage is absolutely something that has harmed communities of color and low-income communities. And I want to put on the record, I'm totally for unions. I want people to have family wage jobs, but it's crazy to pay people a family wage at the beginning when they're training.
Thank you.
Very good. Andy, thank you. Director Branham, as always, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chairman Cruz, thank you. And all of your colleagues for the amazing work you guys do. This has sort of been our day to bring in people who don't get paid very well to serve the community and acknowledge their hard work. And you and your commission do tremendous work. And all you have is our thanks for it. But it's a sincere thanks.
Thank you. Very kind of you.
Appreciate it.
And Mayor Wheeler, I think that there are a couple of people, yes.
Yeah, a couple of invited guests. We have Roz McKenna from McKenna Metals and Juliana Elegant from Lewis and Clark Small Business Legal Clinic. Come on up. And you are invited testimony, and of course, we have public testimony as well if people want to sign up, as this is a resolution. Good afternoon.
Hi. Nice to be with you guys.
It's nice to see you
Mayor and
too. Thank you.
Commissioners. I am Roz McKenna, and my husband right there is Scott McKenna. We are the owners of a Portland manufacturing company named McKenna Metal. Scott McKenna started this business in 1992 in our garage out in Scappoose, while he was working full-time for corporate America, ESCO. Anyways, doing that for many, many years, he finally decided that McKenna Metal was his top priority, and he made that full-time and moved into Portland. We are located right now in Northwest Portland, Nikolai and 23rd industrial area. In 2010, we signed a lease to stay there in that area. And one of the reasons we were able to do that is we knew about programs that could help small businesses. It's only Scott and I that run this business. We don't have deep pockets. We didn't come from rich families. Scott has done this all with our own dollar and the 2 jobs, of course. But anyways, without the E-Zone program, we would not be where we are today. When in 2010, we had 3 employees, and today we have 30, and hoping to grow more. With the program, we were able to buy machines and equipment to help us grow, which would then increase our employees, the number of employees. We were able to hire people at a living wage above the state minimum wage, which we currently still do. We are still part of the E-Zone. We're able to continue training our workforce as well with the dollars that we saved. Over the last 4 years, we've provided 664 hours of off-site training. And we train lean manufacturing fundamentals, HR seminars for those of us learning, leadership programs, financial seminars, and even off-site machine training so they can learn how to use our equipment even better. That's just to mention some of the dollars where it went. So that E-zone program, without having that tax abatement, we wouldn't have been able to afford things like that for our employees. We also are able to provide more benefits to our employees, more medical, dental, paid time off. We currently do the state and local requirements and then some for paid time off. We wouldn't be able to do those little things. We provide supplemental insurance, life insurance, 401k, and safety equipment that some people wouldn't be able to afford on their own, so we buy it for them. But that's where we use that money for all of those kinds of things. Training, benefits. We also treat them as well to lunches every month to thank them for coming to work every day. We do team building exercises during those monthly meetings. We believe in training, teaching, still continue to teach them. We want them to be long-term employees. We take pride in being part of the community. Scott's born and raised in Portland. This is his home. I've been here 32 years and have made it my home. We love everything about being in Portland. So having this and being where we're located, having this program is really helpful. So because, let's see, we take pride in being part of the community and contributing as well. Since 2013, we've spent $3.2 million just within the E-zone program, Portland area, in other companies. That's where we buy all of our, wherever we can buy materials, supplies, things like that. We try to do that all locally. So we believe that high tide raises all ships. More importantly, we see that the Portland community benefits from the program. The thing that really attracts us is the new benefit package that we're doing. We were already doing some of those things, but then this just helps us grow. So we proactively look for opportunities to get involved in the local community, whether it's helping high schools. We go to the high schools and help conduct interviews. We host facility tours for local nonprofits, so they bring in their employees for future growth. Maybe they want to come to work for McKenna Metal someday. But for those who are less fortunate in the social demographic areas is who we bring into our shop and give them tours and teach them they can do this. Yep, they just need the right path to go down. Anyway, so we thought it was wonderful that this new benefits package included that. We tried to do some of that, but now we'll have more help to get more of those people in. Let's see, we have seen some of our peer companies leave the area for what they perceive to be more advantageous locations. We see Portland as a viable location for our business, and the E-zone is one of the reasons we're able to stay where we are today. In closing, I just want to say we support the E-zone program. It helps small businesses grow. We wouldn't be where we are today without them. Andy Reid and Kevin Johnson, I'm sure you guys know Kevin Johnson, have been critical in the success of our business. So everywhere we go and we see those guys, and they introduce us to someone new that can help us in Portland as well. So anyways, we believe in it, and we just want to say how much we appreciate having the E-zone program and the people that run it.
Roz, thank you for that. Thanks for your great comments, and Scott, thanks to you too. You're the silent partner, obviously, in all of this.
He's the maker.
He
I'm the
gave up his
speaker.
garage, so we got to give him credit for something. But I just had one quick question. Where do you get your employees, particularly in this market? Where are they coming from?
Actually, it's really hard right now to get employees. So we've started over a year ago going to the community colleges we started working with the high schools last year to help get interns in. Right now, we're using Craigslist. We try to use the WorkSource system. It could be better designed, I think. But right now, it's really hard to get workforce in our shop. It's difficult.
By the way,
So-
kudos to you for going into the high schools. One of my bureaus, the Bureau of Environmental Services, is trying to diversify its workforce. We're looking for folks who want to have careers at BES, want to be engineers, want to do environmental work. The young students of color that are interested in those professions are finding that there's a lot of opportunity out there. So we're actually going into the high schools and doing early internships, early mentorships, exposing people to these careers and saying, hey, if you do well in school and you come out, these are great careers, and they're stable, and they pay well, and they have good benefits. But the competition is fierce. So going into the high schools, I think, makes a lot of sense, and I commend you for doing that.
Yes, we started that last year, and it has been, and where there's those kids, they just need somewhere, they need to see that, oh, there is more to the world out there. Anyways, it's been, when they come in, their eyes are just so, they're in awe. And we've had several of them. Hopefully this summer, they'll be interns, hopefully. That's what we're working towards.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. Good afternoon.
Hello, thank you so much for having me here. My name is Juliana Elegant, and I'm the Executive Director of the Small Business Legal Clinic, which is a part of Lewis and Clark Law School. We've been around for over 12 years, and it's thanks to the City of Portland and Prosper Portland that we were able to start, and they've supported us throughout that time. We provide transactional legal services to low-income small business owners. The same laws that apply to big corporations and that apply to large companies are also applying to small businesses. Trying to start a business and create a strong legal foundation without the legal support, without advice from an attorney, is extremely difficult, and advice from an attorney is extremely expensive. So it is often cost prohibitive for them to be able to get that support as they're growing and going through some important changes. Legal bumps can erase gains that they have made and can, in fact, completely topple businesses. So the Small Business Legal Clinic provides support for things such as selecting a proper entity, drafting contracts, reviewing leases, understanding the regulations if they're bringing on employees, and even protecting valuable intellectual property. Last year, we served over 300 clients, and that has increased every year for the past 6 years. However, the demand continues to exceed the supply. Our clients find our services to be very important and useful. We received a rating of 4.6 out of 5 last year. 95% of our clients said that they would recommend our services to other businesses, and 94% said they couldn't have done what was done for them with our clinic without the help of an attorney. We are able to leverage community resources. We had almost 100 attorney volunteers last year. They provided over 1,200 hours, and if you monetize that, that's over $300,000 of volunteer time that the attorneys provided because of the ease of volunteering with the Small Business Legal Clinic. We provide what I call is like a matchmaking service between small businesses that need the support and are looking for specific areas of help and attorneys who are experts in those areas. This support is really possible because of the Enterprise Zone Business Development Fund that allows the Small Business Legal Clinic, as well as many other really wonderful nonprofits that are providing business advice and have very deep connections to different communities throughout Portland. The Small Business Legal Clinic is able to support a very diverse group of small business owners because of the referrals and the partnerships that we have with these other nonprofits. Over 80% of our clients last year were people of color, recent immigrants, or women, and allowing them to get that support from our clinic allows them to create that economic wealth and to create a more equitable society throughout. So we're really grateful of the support that we've received from this fund and from Prosper Portland and the City of Portland.
Excellent. Thank you. We really appreciate your participation.
And that explains why we're not getting a general fund request for funding the Small Business Legal Clinic, right? Because you're getting the money through this program?
That's right.
Very nice.
Very good. Thanks to both of you for being here. Appreciate it. Carla, how many people do we have signed up?
We may only have one. If Alicia Jean Applegate, I believe, Lisa Jean Applegate, she may have signed up from the morning session, I think.
All right, very good. This is a resolution. Any further discussion, colleagues? Carla, please call the roll.
Fish.
Well, thank you for an excellent presentation. It's been quite an afternoon. First, the Design Commission report, and now E-zones and the opportunities that they present to us to diversify our workforce and raise standards. And Kimberly, I appreciated your very clear answers to my questions about a couple of proposed E-zones that don't, on their face, seem like they naturally fit, but because of their proximity to areas that are struggling, and because of certain advantages of E-zones in terms of you being able to create a contractual obligation around workforce stuff, it makes sense. So appreciate the hearing and learned a lot. I'm pleased to vote aye.
Hardesty?
I also want to share my appreciation for a very thorough report. My only disappointment is that we don't know who has benefited from all the previous enterprise zone resolutions that have been passed. And I will hold Prosper Portland to its word when it says it will start gathering that data and be ready to report that data back the next time. I have every confidence in Kimberly and her team to do the right thing. I've seen it in action when we are intentional about doing the right thing. I vote aye.
Fritz?
I love this program. I've loved it ever since I was looking to pick holes in it before I was elected and found that there aren't any holes to pick in it. It's really a great program and does what it's supposed to do. I'm very proud of having expanded it to East Portland in 2012. And then I appreciate Mayor Wheeler in leading us to the revisions for the public benefits agreements and the revised reporting in September of 2017, which required the demographic reporting of who's getting the benefits. And so I also appreciate, Mayor, your ongoing commitment to Prosper Portland and to economic development in Portland. Good jobs are what make housing affordable, and you obviously see that connection. I noticed in your proposed budget today that you have $344,000 ongoing and $728,000 one time for Prosper Portland. And those are, based on this report, a wise and prudent investment, and I appreciate that. Aye.
Wheeler?
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate that acknowledgement. And I'd like to take all the credit, but I can't. The people who testified today are doing the hard work. Kimberly and Chair Cruz, you're living up to the promise. There's a lot of ways these things could go sideways if they weren't taken seriously, and I appreciate your diligent leadership. And again, I appreciate the entire commission and your staff. You guys are all doing a great job. This is very easy to support. I vote aye. Resolution is adopted, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.